marriage name. I'm going to be known now as Ashana Deeb. So that's the name change that she was referring to. Where would I start with this? This is interesting. I'm used to, for the last year and a half, I've been giving workshops in New York City and also internationally on a wide variety of subjects that have to do with spiritual development, that have to do with the extraterrestrial contact movement, also the angelic contact movement, and things like that. The workshops I'm used to doing tend to be really large, so I'm kind of trying to get a feel for what is needed for this audience. When I come into a space, I like to get a feel for the people that are there. When I come into a space, I ask myself, how can I best be of service to the people in this audience? Because there are many, many things that I could speak to you about, but the things that I'd like to speak to you about are those things that will be most meaningful and useful and helpful to you. So I'm not psychic, I can't read your minds, but I'm going to try to get a feel here for what information could be of assistance to you. Now, when I put together the program that I was planning to present at this Star Knowledge Conference, we were focusing on something called Entering the Fifth World, which is a reference to some Native American traditions that talk about the different time periods when our culture evolved through different things, and that now we're going through a time of renewal, and we're going to go from the fourth world and into a fifth world, which is really a rebirthing of our race. The lecture that I have planned, and I'm going to stay on the rough outline, I think, is an overview of what it means to be entering the fifth world. What is the fifth world? And also, where do the star nations fit in? Where does star knowledge fit in? In our society, we have been raised culturally with variations on pictures of what reality is. People of Native American tradition have been fortunate in a certain sense because they have learned things that the rest of mainstream culture has forgotten. Most people in Native cultures know that there is contact taking place on this planet, and there has always been contact from beings that reside in other reality fields besides our own. In mainstream reality, we go out into the general populations and what we're taught in mainstream society. We end up with judgments being passed on people who hold those beliefs. We end up with judgments that are very derogatory. Oh, that's just, immature thinking, or it's crazy thinking, that there are actually things that contact us here. Then you have, in our mainstream society that likes to view itself as so perfect in its little paradigm all wrapped up, you have two movements taking place. One is the UFO movement, and another is the New Age movement. It's very interesting that mainstream culture kind of teaches itself, in order to validate its own paradigm, to ignore those things by calling them fringe and making the people involved with those particular ideas appear to be wrong in some way or deranged in some way. The reality of what's taking place here is we have a global population that has been propagandized with mainstream cultural beliefs to the point where they cannot see the reality that is staring them right in the face. When I give my presentations, which involve a huge amount of data, I've given probably 14 now, separate full-day workshops on completely different subject matter, all interrelated, completely different in the last year. There's so much to learn here if we allow ourselves to be stuck with the mainstream beliefs, particularly people that will come to a conference like this. If you were really saturated in mainstream belief systems, you wouldn't be here. You'd think it was just airhead flaky stuff. You came here because there's something inside of you that knows there's something more, and you're searching for that. This is good. This is a start. We need to help other people wake up to realize that there's a reality taking place that mainstream society is blinding itself to. This reality is going to affect us hugely as we move forward in time. The reality involves contact with, yes, extraterrestrials, but even more than this, it involves contact with something that I like to refer to as angelics, and that doesn't mean they're all good. Angelics, as opposed to ETs, in my teachings, have to do with levels of matter density and the biological forms that are characteristic of levels of matter density. In the teachings of the paradigm that I represent, there is something called 15-dimensional physics. We talk about the science of spirituality and the dimensional structure that one takes as consciousness in order to enter manifestation. There are 5 levels of matter density that one passes through. This would be the last level, the most dense. We are being visited now by things in spaceships. Some of them have biology similar to ours. Most of the things that are visiting us right now, and beings, are from different density levels. If we can first of all understand that, we can start to realize there's a whole new area of reality taking place that our mainstream sciences, no matter how much they like to pat themselves on the back, are not prepared or ready to deal with. They are not going to help you. They can't even help themselves. And that's unfortunate. In the system of spiritualized science that I teach, we teach you about your 15-dimensional anatomy. We teach you about your bioenergetic field, your chakra system, but much more than that. We teach you about the deep core structures, your manifestation template, that plugs into that 15-dimensional structure. Because these teachings are really the survival skills of the next millennium. Right now we're in a situation where our race sits perched on a planet that it doesn't even remember. Most of us don't even remember it's alive. Our societies are cruel to the other life forms on this planet. And mainstream society has become numbed. We go in stores and buy meat, and it isn't meat, it is a thing to eat. There's no more connection about that was a living thing. How did it die? How did it live? There's no more caring. This is what mainstream society is happening. When this happens in a culture, it begins a very rapid degradation of that culture. It doesn't evolve, it de-evolves. Our culture has reached a point because of mainstream insensitivities that de-evolution has begun to take place. One of the reasons why we're being visited right now by beings from higher cultures, and some from higher cultures that are no more sophisticated spiritually than we are, is because it is known that our race is at a turning point now. We're at a turning point for several reasons that have to do with the choices we've made, yes, but they have to do with much, much more than this. In the intergalactic spectrum, we are a small race among literally billions of interstellar races. They used to be called the angelic races. There were books once written that were called the angelic rosters that cataloged millions of years of history of the interstellar races, their interactions, their fighting, their warring, and their peacemaking. We are a part of that story. What has happened on this planet is a disgrace, and that disgrace cannot be completely laid in our lap for our lack of understanding, for our lack of dignity, let's say, for respecting the other life forms here. We have been tampered with by interstellar races for literally millions of years. We've also been helped by other ones. They've been, let's say, behind the scenes for quite a while. That's how our mainstream societies grew the way they did, where if you don't see it, it's not there. Just like with microbiology and those kinds of things. Well, there's invisible things you see under microscopes. It's only been the last couple hundred years that they became a reality here. Before, anybody thought they could see invisible things was, like seeing things are crazy. Well, we're starting to see invisible things again here, and they're becoming visible because we're entering a period of a turning point in our race evolution. And it's not just because of who we've become as a species. It's because of what our planet is going through itself. In Native American tradition, there have been many, many prophecies about end times and times of renewal. In Christian doctrine, in Revelations, there has been information provided about end times, Armageddon, and again, renewal. In just about every culture, for thousands of years, there have been remnants of prophecy. Our scientists like to look at these and say, oh, they're just the meanderings of a primitive mind. Yeah, that's a good excuse. If I don't understand it, that means it's not real, you're wrong. That's really the approach that mainstream will give to you. There is a reason why those prophecies were given. Once upon a time, our cultures here on Earth, our human cultures, were advanced. They understood the natural time cycles of planetary evolution. The planet doesn't just evolve randomly, rotating on its axis around the sun with no set pattern. We work on a concept of time here that is artificial. It was created by man in order to break the days up into certain ways of focusing your attention. It is not a natural form of time. Natural time is cyclic, as the seasons will show us, as the rotations of the planet around the sun will show us. There are cycles that this planet moves through in its own evolution, because this planet is a living, growing being, and we're a part of its aliveness, but we're not the whole of its aliveness. There's an event that happened a very, very long time ago, so long ago that all the records of this event have been lost here. But those records were well kept by interstellar visitors, and they are being brought back so we can understand what we are facing now between the year 2000 and the year 2017. There's an event taking place that has not happened in 210,216 years. That is a huge amount of time. That's a huge amount of time of forgetting. It's fortunate in some ways that the event that I will speak of soon was forgotten, because it didn't go well then. It was a natural event called a stellar activation cycle. Now, that's a big word for something you can easily say in 2 words: Stargate cycle. A Stargate or stellar activation cycle is a natural period in Earth's time cycles when certain interdimensional portals open. It allows the influx of frequency from higher dimensional spectrum to move into this planet. It comes through in the stellar waves that come through the solar light spectrum. There's an increase in certain areas of interdimensional spectrum within the solar light spectrum that directly affects the way the planet itself functions and the way biological organisms on the planet function. A stellar activation cycle is a natural phenomenon of planetary history. There are cultures right now that teach as their foundation science something called cheontic morphogenetic science. Morphogenetic refers to matter template, the template of scalar waves, light, and sound waves that form the blueprint upon which energy pulls together to manifest and build up into matter form. When you begin to understand reality in terms of the blueprint behind it, that is where you can begin to identify the cycles and the interrelationships of energy systems. We are an energy system, the planet is an energy system, and we're interwoven. The planet is part of a larger energy system that has to do with the interdimensional stellar communities. The event, the prophecies of many different cultures have been trying to preserve for us so we'd at least have a bit of memory. The Mayans, the timekeepers, they knew that once every 26,556 years, there's a certain level of vibration hit within the Earth's core that allows a phenomenon to occur in coordination with other higher dimensional stellar cycles. It allows for something called grounding of the stellar bridge. The stellar bridge gets into what's called Merkaba mechanics. I don't know if you've heard of Merkaba sciences, but Merkaba can basically be understood as sets of counter-rotating electromagnetic fields that form certain properties and what's called a form constant within them. Merkaba fields are natural phenomena. Everything in manifestation has sets of Merkaba fields within it and outside of it that holds its form into dimensionalized manifestation. So outer expression of space, time, and matter can be known. Now, in stellar activation cycles, there's an alignment of Merkaba fields. And you can picture them in the form of, if you want to look at them flat, picture a Star of David, 6-pointed star, or 2 triangles, one inverted, running through each other. You have sets, one is electrical, one is magnetic. Merkaba fields work on the galactic level like little cogs in a clock, where their axis, their main vertical axis, moves around, and then the cycle above it moves around. Every once in a while, those cycles align on the vertical axis, and when the Merkaba axes align between interdimensional fields on the vertical axis, it creates a bridge, an opening, that frequency, which is wave spectra from a higher frequency field, comes in and moves through the lower frequency fields, infusing those lower frequency fields with a faster energy movement. This process, in New Age terms, is referred to as planetary ascension. That is a word that's thrown around a lot, but I haven't seen very many really good definitions as far as what does that word ascension mean. It's a spiritual term that in Christianity has been put before us as something that we hope will happen if we do good. We've been taught to worship and externalize God, and if we really, really, really are good, maybe he'll let us do this thing called ascension, whatever it is, we get to go home. This was a very, very simplified explanation of what once upon a time used to be temple sciences. There were ancient cultures on this planet called the cloister races. They were part of the human lineage that knew very well the science of ascension, the science of Merkaba mechanics, Keylontic science, matter template science. These sciences were spiritual sciences because what they did was explain to us how consciousness goes from its eternal, non-manifest state into the state of manifestation where it can experience the outer hologram of space, time, and matter. These sciences and the spirituality teachings that go with them, which are called the teachings of the Law of One. These things are our heritage. We would know this by now if it hadn't been for certain things that took place in our ancient history. The ancient history I speak of, there are many layers to this ancient history. The last most pertinent layer was in 9558 BC. There was at that time, or right before that time, a place that historically became known as the fabled Atlantis. Actually, it wasn't called Atlantis, but the Atlantean root race, which is part of the human evolution program. The Atlantean root race were the people who populated that time cycle and those cities. The legends and stories of Atlantis that you hear are true, some of them. There was an ancient culture, but it was not the only ancient culture. Atlantis was not the pinnacle of human evolution. In fact, it was one of the lower points in the higher levels of evolution. In 9558 BC, Atlantis was using crystal generator power, which is Keylontic morphogenetic science, applied to how the planetary grids work, taking the core planetary energy and being able to transfer it through the ley lines and grids in the planetary body, using the stargates and being able to keep them open to generate free energy and amplifying it with natural substances such as quartz crystal or selenite. In the Atlantean period, these technologies were common knowledge, part of them. They had a stargate open on the planet. There are several stargates on the planet. They had one open to the fifth dimensional level. That allowed fifth dimensional frequency to move through here. And it also opened up a portal in time between here and the reality systems that exist in the next density up of matter, which is a semi-etheric matter form. It was an opening in time cycles. Now, the Atlantean technology was fine. Technology can be good or it can be harmful depending on how you use it. During the Atlantean period, there was a race called the Syrian Anunnaki that had been originally, they have been involved with our race for literally 560 million years. But at that time, they were trying a hijacking program. They were attempting to take the human experiment, because the human, Earth human, was an experiment of Buddha. They were trying to take it in their own directions, which was not their prerogative to do. They were going to do this in order to get control of the stargates here, which originally were appointed to humans. Humans were intended to be the guardians and the keepers of the interplanetary Templar complex. And because that Templar complex and its stargate system was so valuable to the interdimensional communities, there have been many, many things thrown in our way here to make sure we never woke up enough to regain our position as the guardians and keepers of the Templar. In Atlantis, what happened was the Anunnaki came in and they infiltrated our culture. They didn't do it at first by air raids coming in and blowing things up. They came in as our buddies. They came in and visited. They came in and some decided to stay. And that was fine because some of them were nice, but others weren't. What took place where certain sacred teachings, the temple teachings, that were at that time available to all people, that taught of the natural powers that you have as a being within your body, your natural connection to the earth energy systems, and our connection to the stars. Those teachings were there in something called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. When the Anunnaki came in, Thoth was an Anunnaki, by the way, but he was working on pro-human side most of the time. The original teachings of the Emerald Tablets were twisted and distorted by certain factions of Anunnaki that came in. They gained control over Atlantean cultures and infiltrated and began the degradation of Atlantean culture by twisting certain things. One of the largest things they did was twist the concept of God to become an external thing. When you understand the science of manifestation and the science of consciousness, it becomes apparent that there is a singular energy source, and it's a conscious energy source, that has no beginning or end, but out of which all things come, and actually within which all things take place. Those teachings were originally part of the high science and spiritual teachings that even the Atlanteans had, and that wasn't that long ago. By twisting the teachings, we were taught to worship gods outside of ourselves, which means taking your organic power and connection to the universe and placing it on someone else, and then feeling powerless like you have to grovel in order to get their approval, so you can hopefully have a life that's not traumatic. In Atlantean culture, it didn't get a chance to go too much further because they blew up the crystal generators that were used to amplify the natural Templar energies coming from the planetary grids. The main explosion occurred on a place that was called the Grual Point. Grual is a word from a planet called Tara, which is the version of Earth that exists in dimensions 4, 5, and 6, which is called density 2. I'm throwing a lot of information at you here, and I'm getting guidance to redirect a little bit. Okay. I do this, by the way. Okay. I'll let you know something. I do have open communication with the Guardian Alliance that she had introduced that I speak to the Guardian Alliance, and I have since for 28 years. I'm being asked to redirect this because this isn't a 6-hour workshop like I'm used to. But they want me to bring it up to the present and say the most important thing that I can introduce you to in this short period of time is the fact that between the year 2000 and 2017, we are entering a stellar activation cycle. A stellar activation cycle is not just a big word for nothing that happens. It's the activation of the planetary Templar complex due to opening of the stargates. The stargates on this planet are called the Halls of Amentet. They connect to a place called Inner Earth and a place called Parallel Earth, and they connect to the other density levels of this planet. When I speak about density levels, there are 5. All planets and galaxies that we see exist within a framework called a time matrix. A time matrix is an energy construct with a very set primal order and form. It has 15 dimensions. Dimensions are specific sets of frequency bands that are separate yet interrelated. The dimensions travel in sets of 3, forming 3-dimensional reality systems. So there are 5 3-dimensional reality systems in our time matrix that give us the 5 matter density levels. We call them harmonic universes, the 5 harmonic universes. We have harmonic universe 1, where Earth is stationed, and the galaxies that we perceive are stationed in harmonic universes 1, dimensions 1, 2, and 3. We have harmonic universe 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6. Harmonic universe 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. Harmonic universe 4, dimensions 10, 11, and 12. And harmonic universe 5, dimensions 13, 14, and 15. This is the organic primal structure that our reality takes place within. That primal structure is reflected in our bodies, in the microcosm. It's also reflected in the Earth body. In the New Age movement, you'll hear words like Earth, Tara, Gaia, all referring to this planetary body. What has not been commonly known is that each one of those represents a different harmonic of this planet's manifestation, which represents a different time cycle of this planet's manifestation. Earth is what it is called in density 1, dimensions 1, 2, 3. Tara is what it is called in density 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6. Gaia is what it is called in density 3, dimensions 7, 8, and 9. And there's one that hasn't surfaced yet. It's called Aura Matana. That is what is considered the Christos level of this planet, dimensions 12, 11, and 10. When we get into Keylontic science, we learn a lot about dimensional structure and the levels of matter density. we learn that the 12th dimensional frequencies are the transition point where light starts to take on form of prematter, hydroplasmic liquid light. That is the first stage of entering matter density. So the outer Matana pattern that goes with this planet, that's in harmonic universe 4, is the liquid light version of this planet. You come down from there to Gaia. In density 3 is etheric matter, which is kind of like ghost-like. If you want to visualize etheric matter, it's kind of like if you saw a ghost, what that might look like in the way we frame things in our society. When you come into harmonic universe 2, where Tara is located, we're dealing with semi-etheric matter, which means the biological forms there are part silica-based, but they're part carbon-based, like we are. So it's a thicker matter density, not quite as thick as ours. But these are physical reality systems that take place simultaneously, because when we learn the physics involved with manifestation, we learn that time is simultaneous. That linear time is created by consciousness breaking itself into a small unit and following a certain track of vibration that gives it a linear experience of movement through a set vibrational cycle that allows us to perceive an externalization of a holographic picture that the consciousness projects through the body mechanism. The body is part of the hologram. There's a lot I could teach about chemontic science. That's available in other forms. I've been teaching this for about a year now. But what's important to understand, when we're dealing with this science paradigm, this will give us the keys to understanding what we do with our spiritual selves. But it'll give us the keys to understanding what we need to do in the next 17 years. This phenomenon of a stellar activation cycle, though it can take place once every 26,556 years, doesn't always take place then. It will only take place then if the core vibrational rhythm in the planet's energies at the core of the planet are high enough to anchor the Merkaba fields that I talked about before, to bring the Merkaba fields of the solar fields into a direct alignment with the planetary fields. That has not happened here in 210,216 years of full alignment. The Atlanteans could only open a fifth dimensional gate to Tara. What is happening here is a full alignment. We're going through something that there is no recorded history on this planet that could prepare us for. And our scientists have no idea of the rate of the science that it would take to understand what is taking place here. So if we try to turn to our scientists, there's not enough time. I mean, the ETs can come down and try to educate everybody. Like, good luck. You're going to learn 2,000 years of science in maybe 15, so in the next 2 you can do something about it. It's not going to work that way. That's why most of the time when pro-human visitor contact is made here, it's with individuals. The individuals it's made with are usually people that they know, because we all incarnate out of the same reality field in D12, the Christos. You can call it Christos. You don't have to like the word Christos. You can call it Great Spirit. You can call it whatever you want. But there is a common collective of prematter density that we all exist in as a consciousness and manifest here through. So there are stellar kin, some with good agendas, some with not good agendas, here to try to get across to us what is happening. That would be the pro-human agenda visitors. But there's something that happens every time a full stellar activation cycle takes place here. And the full stellar activation cycle is the lining up of the vertical axis of the galactic Merkaba fields all the way through the 5 harmonics of density, which brings in a huge influx of frequency into this planet. What always happens here, because that influx of frequency opens stargates that are usually dormant, stargates that go all over the place. There's very important places in the universe. Every time. We have the good guys that come in and try to help us. And we also have certain stellar races that are from the middle dimensional time cycles, from density 2 and density 3, and a few from density 4, that come in and try to take control of this race and this planet, because they want control of the halls of momentous stargates. Humans in situations like that end up as pawns in the game that's much, much bigger than what we're prepared to deal with. But if we realize the game is taking place, we start to make sense of the reality that's happening around us. In the UFO movement, there's a lot of talk about the human Illuminati factions working through the government, the secret governments and what they're doing, and they know about ETs and they're not telling anybody. That's just the first layer of the onion skin. For 70 years, the governments here in the United States and several other countries have had active treaties with a race called the Zeta Reticuli. They're the little gray guys that everybody talks about these days. The Zeta Reticuli are a race that originally came from Orion. They're a reptilian race strain out of what is called the Draconian matrix. The Draconian matrix, if we go back to what used to be in the Bible before it was taken out, the angelic rosters explained about the Elohim and the Seraphim and many other angelic races. These were stellar races of different density levels. The Draconian matrix was a consciousness collective on the 10th dimensional frequencies that emerged out of what are called the fallen Seraphim. The Seraphim races were races in good standing. They were, I won't even go into what good standing means right here, because it's not that some are bad and some are good. We're all part of one. But there are some who can embody that and treat other beings with love and light and decency. And there are others who have lost the ability to hold that consciousness and they need help. The fallen Seraphim races created the Draconian matrix. And the Draconian matrix has created several different type of races in the densities coming down. Some of them are here, some of them are in inner Earth. There's actually human lines that are connected to them. The Zeta Reticuli are a diversified group. Some of them tried to go back into the light, let's say. They tried to repair the genetic damage that stopped them from embodying unity consciousness, because it was genetic. They couldn't pull in the frequencies of the 12th dimension, so they could not understand the full frequency spectra of connecting to all other things, so they could treat the other things in abusive ways and not realize that that's what they were doing. The Zeta Reticuli race is here, but they're the least of our worries. And this is part of why I bring the information I do out to the public. Right now, I watch people in the UFO movement and the New Age movement, and there is so much a need to understand what is going on behind the scenes. The Zetas are in over their heads, because there are stronger Draconian races that are now interested here. Since we found out in 1998 that the stellar activation cycle would proceed, and once it starts, you don't turn back. It has to cycle. At that point, the Dracon matrix itself got involved. These things look like about 12-foot tall upright dinosaurs. They're not very nice. They're a very convoluted race that needs a lot of healing. They became involved. They offered treaties to certain ones of the Zetas that were working with human Illuminati governments. And the Zetas accepted it, the Zeta Regalians. So if you hear about Regalians out there, know what you're dealing with. They're about the most militant and nastiest faction of the Zetas. They formed agreements with the Draconian matrix to run a one world order agenda here. So the human Illuminati that 70 years ago decided, oh, won't it be fun, we can get all this technology and we can use these little stellar beings and that kind of stuff. They found themselves in a very precarious position. They lost control of the game. Right now in the human Illuminati factions, there's a lot of fear and there's fragmentation because they don't know what to do. Humanity was sold out by portions of itself that were in power positions. And then those forces found the game turned around on them. Where all of a sudden, these reptilian overlord things are coming in, and they have no say in the matter. They either listen or get taken out. That was what the human Illuminati got to experience in their spiritual growth process. It was basically like instant karma. But it leaves us in a precarious position. We have this agenda taking place of reptilian race strains, Zeta race strains that are connected to them, and human Illuminati that walk around in human bodies just like us, running a one world order agenda that intends to create pole shift here to clear the real estate. That is what they want to do. Now, it's very hard to create pole shift on the planet. You can't just get up in outer space with a pole. But in a stellar activation cycle, this planet is very, very delicately balanced. Because as the frequencies come in from the higher dimensional fields progressively over the cycle, which will take place between 2000 and 2017, something called releasing of the seven seals takes place. This was mentioned in Revelations, but it was kind of very convoluted in terms of angels and seals and horns and things. What it really came down to was with the stellar frequencies coming in, there were certain sound tones, the horns, entered in to the planetary grids that would release frequency seals within the scalar wave patterns that form the vortices that hold the energy of this planet together. there are 7 primary vortices, or planetary chakras. Our bodies have 7 primary chakras. We actually have 15 of them, but the ones we're most familiar with here in the teachings that have been available are 7. The 7 primary vortices, or chakras, on a planetary level are geographical locations that will be the receptors and transmitters of those higher dimensional frequencies. Now, we have already opened 3 seals. The first, second, and third, actually 4 just opened. First, second, and third vortice seals have opened. But that hasn't caused a whole lot of things here noticeable because our planet is in a 3-dimensional system made of the frequencies of dimension 1, 2, and 3. You open vortice 1, it brings in D1 frequency. That's already running through the grids. It's just going to get a little kick and be a little bit more. D2, the same way. D3, the same way. The interesting things start to happen when you start to open the seals on the 7 primary vortices, vortices 4 through 7, that go with the higher dimensional time cycles and the higher dimensional frequency bands. It will create a progressive raising in the frequency of this planet, which will affect the angular rotation and particle spin of the molecules that the planet's made of, including our bodies. It will increase the oscillation rate of the planet and everything on it from the core molecular level. What this can create, now you can look at it as energy coming into a pipe. If there is no blockage in that pipe, the energy comes in, flows through, no problem, comes out the other end. The planetary grids and our body systems and our DNA template can be looked at as a pipe. If those stellar energies were coming in, we have a natural adaptability factor where the pipe would open to receive the frequencies. We begin to make these transitions on a molecular level, but they wouldn't cause us harm. The planetary body would absorb these frequencies, and it would create a time acceleration for a little while. But if things were working well, it wouldn't create any major problems. However, if you take a lot of frequency coming in, and you take that pipe, pretend it's water, that frequency builds up and builds up and builds up. What happens when that buildup occurs is you have what we call ley lines and axiotonal lines running through the planetary grids, which are main energy feed systems that literally feed the molecular base of this planet from the core building blocks of matter, called particle A, particle A, and particle M. So you have energy coming in. It needs to spread out through the grids, but there are so many blockages in the grids that buildup occurs. When that buildup occurs, if you have an energy system, you can compare it to an organ in your body, that if there are blockages in the energy blueprint behind it, and energy tries to circulate through it, progressively builds up until that organ becomes diseased. In the planetary body, what it creates is vulnerability in the tectonic structure. It creates vulnerability in the weather structure and how the planet relates to itself. The weather can be kind of viewed as the planet's emotional body. It creates erratic energy patterns within the electromagnetic fields. What's interesting is people who study a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff have found that scientists have been, every time they've tried to release some of the data they have found on deep earthquaking that has been recorded progressively building, on certain other phenomena, so changes in the solar light spectrum. Every time this information that has been found by certain little groups of scientists have been trying to release, it's found out. The changes are already beginning to make themselves known. We don't have to repeat what happened the last time. The last time, 10,216 years ago, there were beautiful temple cities here. They call them the crystal temple cities. They were attacked by a race called the Nephilim at that time in order to try to get control of Halls of Mente. And they threw the grids out of balance and they shut down the stargates. If you shut the stargates down manually when they are opening, it creates instant pole shift within about a 3-day period. It also creates something called a red pulse, which is a frequency that builds up through the solar Merkaba fields in the D1 frequency band. And it hits a certain level, and it's called red because D1 frequency would be of the red light spectra, the wave form of the light, red light spectra. It builds up frequency in the solar Merkaba fields and blasts it through the D1 frequencies of Earth's Merkaba fields. And a full red pulse will literally vaporize everything on the surface, every biological form on the surface. 200,000 years ago, we didn't have a full red pulse. pulse, only a partial. But it was enough to create a level of devastation. That is a deep imprint in our cellular memory. All of us carry that somewhere. We are entering a cycle now where that pattern is still like a little piece of movie film, like a holographic template in the planetary grids. It is still a possibility. It could happen again. Right now, if you look at what's out there in the UFO movement, who's writing books and who's talking to who and who's channeling who and all this kind of wonderful stuff, excuse me, you'll find that the Zeta groups, conveniently for them, are trying to tell us they're here to help us. They're here because Nibiru is coming in, and it's going to create a pole shift, and there's going to be firestorms, but they'll help the survivors. They're trying to help us manifest their vision. They want the real estate cleared, and they want a group of humans that are their buddies that they can use for hybridization. That's their agenda. If we start to look, really look, go on the website, see what is happening with the UFO stuff. Check out Galactic Federation, the old Anunnaki buddies of the Emerald Order. See, we're Guardian Alliance, they're Galactic Federation, and at times they've worked well with us, and at other times they're more interested in Anunnaki hybridization than they were about fulfilling the original design of the human being on Earth. So there are groups there. You need to be careful of what you buy into. And more than anything, you need to be aware that there's lots of time later to figure those things out. What's important right now is to get some basic skills. A, on how to not get manipulated by what we call intruders. And yes, there still are space brothers from the sky, from D12 and the Christos. Yes, we love them all in the law of one. But that doesn't mean you let them walk all over you and flatten you either. It means you learn how to love in a stance of power, tough love. And first you need to love yourself. We're facing a set of conditions that is so amazing and so profound that if it were recognized on a mass level, you'd have mass hysteria. If it was really like, the president comes out and the scientists go, we're entering a stellar activation cycle, and this means do-do-do-do, people would be flattened. They'd be so overwhelmed with the prospects of what that could mean. So that's why it's not being done that way. We're being taught information to prepare core groups, or what are called planetary shields workers. Planetary shields happen to be the scalar wave blueprints that the planetary base manifests upon. It's advanced Merkaba mechanics. It's advanced chemontic morphogenetic science. It's science of the future of the ancient past. And it's being brought to some of us who are ready and willing to learn. So we can begin to realize and remember that first of all, our bodies are directly connected to the planet through the DNA template. There is a blueprint behind the DNA that they can see that runs frequency if it's activated. Human beings are the only vehicle and vessel on this planet that can hold a full 12th dimensional frequency because our original DNA template was a 12-strand DNA template. What is happening right now are you have guardian groups trying to get certain groups of humans aware enough to begin activating their DNA templates. The process is called bioregenesis. It's regenerating the original 12-strand pattern because, like a hologram, no matter what happens to the whole, to the whole, if it fragments or pieces of it, like our DNA template has become, still within that whole, within the piece, there is the whole. We can regenerate the 12-strand pattern. We have 12 years to do it. We're not going to do it on a planetary level. But if enough groups of people work with it, it will create what's called a critical mass shift in the race morphogenetic template, which means the rest of the people will start activating their DNA. The DNA becomes very important for two reasons. One, through the DNA of an activated human that can carry anywhere from 4th through 12th dimensional frequency activated in their body, you can progressively clear the blockages out of the scalar grids. You can realign the scalar wave templates that make up the planetary grids to remove those blockages so the planet can start holding and processing that energy that's coming in. It's also very important on a personal level. Because what happens on a personal level in a stellar activation cycle, now most biological life forms have a natural adaptability. They are built in a way, their templates, their DNA templates are built in a way that if certain frequencies come in from the sun, it triggers the activation of certain dormant coding in the DNA. So they progressively become able to pull in that frequency. And they are able to move through a stellar activation cycle without having biological harm come to their bodies. The human body always worked that way. At least it did in the original times. What has happened in our ancient history, and this is pre-biblical, but not that far back. I mean, our history goes back 560 million years to a planet called Terra. But just in relatively recent history, what has happened has been Anunnaki and Draconian interbreeding, hybridization, that has created distortions in our DNA template that do not allow those natural strand activations, those natural higher frequency activations to take place. If we just sit through a stellar activation cycle, it's going to accelerate things. And it'll affect everybody differently, depending on how many scalar wave distortions are in the DNA template. Some people will just have, let's say, emotional body stuff happening. Some people will go crazy. Other people will be able to get through it, but it'll be uncomfortable. Some people will get very physically sick. You will notice an increase in the disease rates as we move between now and 2017. But you don't have to be one of those statistics. We're teaching a program of bioregenesis, which you don't just teach in a 2-hour or 45-minute presentation. It's a progressive process that starts with understanding the science, and then it starts with understanding. You don't have to have a degree in physics to understand the science. Don't be scared about 15-dimensional physics, okay? A lot of times, it's funny, the Guardian Alliance members, the priests of Ur, who have taught me the things that I know, look at me and have said, you know, this is how we teach our science. We prefer it this way. We look at how your scientists teach, and they take words and make words so confusing that it takes so long to just figure out what all the words mean that they lose the whole concept that they're trying to work for. And they also make it unavailable to the average person to understand. What is that? There is an easier way to understand matter template physics. And you can plug it in if you happen to be a physicist. If you can understand the paradigm that they're bringing us from the future and from the ancient past, you will be able to plug it in. You can take what we call part of K, part of Chi, and part of Cum and start putting words like muons and things on. It doesn't matter what you call them. What matters is having enough knowledge as a human being to know what to do with your parts. It comes down to a very simple procedure called building the Merkaba vehicle, which means activating those electromagnetic fields around and within the body. That is done by progressively activating very specific parts of the DNA template. Right now, we're functioning on about a 3-strand activation that gives us 3-dimensional perception. We begin activating strands 4 and higher. Bringing in higher frequency starts to build the Merkaba vehicle. There's a science to this. It's easy. There are practices you can use because the mind generates scalar waves. Every time you think a thought, every time, you are creating a scalar wave pattern, which is a standing wave pattern. We use the word scalar wave in relation to a pattern of light and sound that is fixed, not a wave that goes like this, but a wave that's standing, a columnar wave that holds its form. That is what the template of manifestation on the universal and the personal level is made of. Every time your consciousness does what we call think a thought, it generates a scalar waveform that goes into the larger scalar wave pattern of the body and manifests a condition there. Every idea you think, every word you say to yourself, every belief you agree to hold, you are setting an electromagnetic, mathematical, geometrical grid into your body's manifestation template, into your reality field. This is why in the New Age movement they say your beliefs create your reality. Thoughts are things, indeed they are. We can use that power to fix this, or at least to create, as we move through this as a race, to create a situation for ourselves and those we love that will be better than if we didn't by ourselves. The stellar activation cycle could have gone in a more peaceful way, but right now there are interference from 2 visitor groups. One are the Anunnaki, and they come in several different forms. One is the Palladian Nagawira form, which are pretty bodies, and they look like humans. There are several different forms of them. They are, at this point, one of the dominant forces in the teachings of the New Age movement. They teach what we call light, love, and cluelessness. And it's not meant to offend anybody, because light, love, and light, love are great things. But there is a resistance factor happening in the New Age movement that was never intended to be there. It's a resistant factor that says, oh, I don't need to know that. So-and-so's fixing it for me. Or I manifest my reality. I am God completely now. It's like, okay, can you fly? Because if you were and you had that much control over your template, yeah, you'd be able to do that. They are purposely being misled to not look at what the science is behind it. So they do not know how to activate the DNA. It's a manipulation ploy that's being run by what's called the fallen Anu Elohim. And they can be very so sweet and very pretty when they want to, when they come in spaceships. They're affiliated with a lot of the Palladian movements, the Palladian contact movements. Not all of them, but most. They're affiliated with some of the Syrian movements. Not all of them, but several. Then, of course, you have your good old boys that have been here for a long time working with the human Illuminati, which are the draconian races. We have two one world order agendas running, both of whom would like to create pole shift because they want the real estate. And they'd like to say humans to have something to work with once they clear the real estate. That is not in divine right order. That is not a plan that's in divine right order. And it's a plan that can work only if humans are willing to sit there and let it happen. Now, of course, they're teaching you to be blind, so you don't see that. Oh, don't think about things. They're paranoid when you think about that, you know. People do this in the New Age movement. I'm in Christ consciousness now. Polarity isn't reality for me. So, you know, anything down from D12 will have polarity to it. The idea of Christ consciousness is bringing them together and harmonizing. It's not saying, I'm not going to look at the bad side. I just want to see the light. That's what's happening here. If we can become aware that there are two agendas running here that are intended to move us towards something in the next several years that we don't want to see, then we can start to get enough gumption up to say, hey, we're going to let this happen. You know, whatever, we're not that stupid. Just because you've programmed us and twisted our teachings and everything for the last, many thousand years doesn't mean we're totally stupid. There is a large collective of beings that collectively refer to themselves as the Guardian Lions and several other masters teaching groups that are here to honor something called the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant was a treaty, an interstellar treaty, all the way up to the fifth density, dimension 15. It was made 248,000 years ago. It was a promise of support by many, many different interstellar nations to assist human beings on Earth to re-evolve back into the 12-strand beings that they were intended and created to be, so they could reclaim their commission, their original creation commission, which was to serve as guardians and keepers of the interplanetary and universal Templar complexes. We were created as a guardian race, and the ones who were messing with other races here and exploiting other life forms and abusing energy to the point where it could have literally collapsed the whole time matrix that we are in. They didn't like it very much when there was a race created to stop that from happening. So our race, since its creation 560 million years ago on Terra, the angelic human, we have been riddled with this polarity drama because we were commissioned with helping those interstellar races to heal. Right now, if we can be aware, there are some agendas running that if we know how to handle ourselves, we can help. We don't have to be devastated, we don't have to be scared, we certainly don't help the Zetas out by sitting there planning on waiting for firestorms and hoping you're going to get picked up in a spaceship. There's a lot more effective things you can do with yourself. These are some of the things that I have a feeling there's somebody else in after me, because I'm seeing people come in the door that look like maybe speakers for after me. I'm probably gone over. I tend to do this. I'm used to like 6 to 8 hour workshops, so it's just like, push a button and shut her off because she just keeps going. I do have a workshop tonight at 7 for anybody that wants to come. Somebody tell me on time. Am I over on time? Nope. Keep going. Keep going? Okay, I just don't want to crash into anybody else's time space. Okay. Oh, it's breaking? Okay. Okay, well, I'll go for a little bit more, because I'm actually, the things I was going to talk about, I'm covering a lot of them, but in certain ways more intensive than I was planning on. Little things I was just going to hint to that and then get you up to the point where, okay, and that means this in the workshops. But I've like I said when I came in, I've tried to feel the energy here. What can I best say of what I know? What can I share with you that will have the most meaning, where you can leave this room and say, maybe I can do something with this. Oh, maybe that's part of what's going on in the world. And maybe I'm not just a powerless person here that, I'm not worried about what's on TV tonight, because why bother being, because we're all powerless here anyway. That's what our mainstream teaches us. That's not true. right? We're facing, on a mass level, conditions that only a tiny percentage of that mass level has any idea they're coming. We may experience earth changes. It depends. There is a very sensitive point coming up in 2003. I would think most of you, I hope, would have heard of the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk Project. Have you heard of those? Yeah. Okay. They were time blood experiments that were conducted at the motivation of the Zeta groups. Little pieces of technology, without giving you the whole picture, that create rips in time. What is time? What are rips in time? They're rips in the electromagnetic grids, in the planetary grids. When they're done artificially, see, stargates are natural opening cycles. Rips are where you force it open. The Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment, which were linked, they created a link, a rip in time, that linked two time periods, 1943 and 1983 together. They were done at those times for a specific reason, because there's a certain speed that is reached in Earth's Merkaba fields. It's called a magnetic peak. It happens every 20 years. The next big peak is 2003, August 2003. The Zetas plan to make a link between the hole they made in the Philadelphia experiment, the hole they made in the Montauk Project, and another one that will create a loop in time that extends from around 1920 all the way up into 2012. Because they want to bring in something called beam ships. Beam ships are larger vessels, interdimensional vessels, that have the capacity to transmit frequency that can create what's called a frequency fence here, which is part of a mass mind control technology. That's what they want to do. If they bring those beam ships in, what happens is the planetary grids get knocked out of alignment very rapidly. If they start transmitting those frequencies from those beam ships, we go into pole shift. It's not a hypothetical, because there's a place called parallel Earth that's connected to us in our timeline. It would be the anti-particle version of our Earth. And in between parallel Earth and our Earth, there's a place called inner Earth. And they're literally three separate but interwoven reality fields that travel the same tracks of time, just at a little bit different speed. Parallel Earth runs ahead of us in time by several years. It progressively get less and less until we're on the same timeline in 2012 when the House of Mente opened. Right now, parallel Earth, in their period in their timeline, that is about 2008 in their timeline right now, this month, November, they're going into pole shift. They are starting to roll this month. Because over there, the Zetas came in. Over there, the Anunnaki, as the Pleiadians, came in first and introduced themselves as our space brothers. And then the Zetas and the Dracos came in and tried to take over the Anunnaki. And it all went to heck very quickly. It was not a nice scene over there. And we do have versions of ourselves walking those reality fields. Now, if nothing was done, if guardian races hadn't intervened, that would have manifested here, because that's how it works. It comes into parallel first, the antiparticle universe, it does its thing there, then it manifests and kicks back down here. We have this connection with the parallel and the inner Earth reality systems, literally, biologically, through our DNA templates. We are literally linked to our doubles and our inner Earth cells. And the planetary grids here are literally linked to the parallel planetary grids. So what affects one in under normal circumstances will affect the other. What can be done in a situation like this to stop this from occurring is literal breaking of the time vector line and plugging this time vector line that Earth is running on, which is a particle pulsation rhythm that's set within the core molecules of which the planet's composed, plugging it into a different rhythm and getting it to change rhythm and shift, where it's literally taking one time band and splicing it into another. That is what is being done here. It's called the grid zone. We can successfully, when the magnetic grids peak out in August 2003, make it so they can't bring those beam ships in. Then the Bridge Zone project has a very good chance of working. We still may get some pole wobbling. We may get some weather changes and some tectonic and volcanic problems. But we still have a chance of not going into pole shift. We still have a chance of not repeating what happened 210,000 years ago. What is happening right now between the guardian races? They are trying to amplify the grid speed very, very quickly between now and June of 2003. It's getting into the science of it just a little. It means raising the frequency, the core frequency of pulsation of the planetary molecular structure to a level that it normally would not be for another year and a half. Now, I mean, that sounds long, I'll just make it a little faster. When you're in a stellar activation cycle and you have those vortices, those 7 seals opening, one every 4 years, the 4th one just opened, you don't need any extra acceleration in your grids. Okay? This is going to create a challenge because we may start to see some effects of this. First of all, at a personal level, you will start to have something called karmic bleed-through popping up all over the place. And if you know it's there, it will help you. It doesn't matter if you're Christian. You don't have to believe in reincarnation. Time is simultaneous, which means, wait a minute, re doesn't really apply, does it? You have simultaneous selves in different time vectors. That's what reincarnation is. They're happening right now. You will start, because the DNA template activating, because of the grid speed accelerations, start to get bleed through from those other time periods. And I've seen some very, very intense versions of this, or some very, very mild ones. There are things you'll deal with on a personal level that it helps to know what they are. There are certain symptoms of what we call 4th DNA strand template activation. And you might think you're nuts. You start seeing things, you start hearing things, people are talking to you in your head. No, don't run to the shrink. Don't run to the psychologist because they'll put you on lithium or something else and you'll be in real trouble. You know? And you know why? Psychologists are good people. They've just been trained with a bad paradigm. It doesn't reach high enough. One of the things I'd like to do sometime is go into the professional communities who would actually listen to anything I had to say and present the paradigm of 15-dimensional physics and 15-dimensional anatomy of the human body and subtle body systems that shows you where the consciousness is stationed. Because then they can really help people. What's going to be hard is we're walking into a very rapid time acceleration, to put it simply, between now and 2003. And it's going to continue after that. But hopefully it will go good between now and 2003. You may get personal effects. You may get jittery energy. You may get hot flashes, cold flashes, think your hormones are going crazy. You may have things like vision and hearing, higher sensory perception starting to occur in your life. There's a lot of different sensations. You may get weird little energy things, like feel energy running down your body. You may start to feel presences, things that aren't normal for you. If you get these things, they're part of higher strand activation. The psychic senses are part of that. So you may get more and more of this. You may also get different types of fatiguing symptoms because the body can't process that frequency. It's going to cause issues. That's why we've been given techniques of what are bioregenesis, that are ways to use the mind to direct energy to open up conduits in the body. They do Kundalini activations, DNA activations, Merkaba activations, which prepares the body to hold those things. So the programs are very, very useful. On the table that we have in the other room, I have one. It's called the temporary Maharic seal. It's a natural phenomenon that would occur in your biofield naturally if you had full 12-strand template activation. But it takes a while to build that type of activation when you're regenerating the imprint. The temporary Maharic seal technique, if you practice it like it said on the sheet, will progressively help the body to hold more and more 12th dimensional subharmonics, which will progressively activate the strands faster but in a harmonious, natural way. And it will help to clear out any distortions that are in the strand template. So if you're going to learn any one technique, there's hundreds of them, literally. We have numbers of programs that work with different areas. But the Maharic seal is free. It's on it's a purple sheet, not a violet sheet on the table in the other room. I would like you to work with it, try it. It will also begin the process of more rapid expansion of your conscious awareness. It may start with more lucid dreaming. Yeah, that's the one. I don't have one in here with me. Yes, it's got the purple sheet there. Okay. Now, with that purple sheet, you could read it onto a tape for yourself because they work just as effectively and sometimes more so you're not distracted by trying to read. Read it onto an audio tape for yourself. Eventually I'll have it on audio tape, but we didn't get there yet. We have so many other things we've been trying to get done. If you use it, and use it like I said on the tape, it'll do a couple things. First of all, it'll give you a temporary 12th dimensional seal on your bioenergetic fields, which means you won't get astral body infiltration from the Zetas or the Anunnaki who are trying to manipulate people. It also means if you happen to have been implanted it will begin to dissolve and dislodge the implantations. So, it's a protective device, but even more important, it activates the DNA in its natural sequence, and it pushes the reset button on the body and begins that process. So that, I think it looks like people are getting ready to go. I don't know if this is like a mass movement or just some people. But you're still here. Okay. How am I in time?
I'm 1 minute.
It's been an hour. How long was I supposed to talk? Do you know, Phil?
Yeah.
I'll find out.
Okay, I'll keep going. Okay. All right. Now, I've thrown a lot of information at you, different pieces, here and here and here and here and here. There is a linear sequence where this can be unraveled slowly. So just say, what did you say? There's like 500 things happening here. Yeah, there are a lot of things happening all at once. It comes down to we're entering a rather challenging situation that we don't have to be afraid of. We just need to be empowered within. We are being given by a number of guardian race contacts, technologies to help ourselves. One of the biggest questions that people asked me was, well, if it's so bad, why don't the guardians just come in and say, hey, I'll land on the White House lawn. It's like, hey, you guys are in trouble. And I asked that myself. I said, why don't you just do something? And they said, we are doing something. Do you know what will happen if we come in? I said, right now, they weren't worried about us. I said, we were the least of their problems as far as this rioting going crazy because, oh my God, yes, ETs are real. Now, what they were worried about was it would have been self-defeating. If they're trying to help this race and help us get through this, right now you have two competing factions of visitor races that each control a portion of the planetary grids and the vortices, the interdimensional vortices. If the guardian races attempt to come in, they would have created war because they would have stopped, the negative races would have stopped them. And we would have been caught with Star Wars right in our skies. And Star Wars in a stellar activation cycle will create pole shift. So their hands were tied that way as far as direct confrontation. What they've been trying to do is negotiate treaties. They've tried, some of them have worked, some of them have not. They have had some of the races that were being manipulative here actually have amnesty treaties and say, okay, all right, it's getting too hairy. This really isn't fair. I guess we won't do this. Usually because it's not in their own best interest. But right now, what they're trying to do is contact groups of individuals. And in the last several months, they gave me some procedures. And I put them together in this book. This is not a published book yet. This is something we're putting out. It's called E.T. and Angelic Realities, the Survival Handbook. It teaches you a whole lot about our relationship to the stellar races, and it also gives you techniques to begin dealing with biofield protection and also initiating contact with pro-human races, with the races that are pro-human, let me put it that way. The Guardian Alliance that I was contacted by when I was very young, in fact, I knew them when I was born. When I was born, I remember the birthing process. I remember moving my consciousness into the fetal body, and I remember the whole process. There was a reason for that. I was born with the 6th DNA strand template activated. That's called an indigo child. Indigo children that you hear about out there, they're a very specific sort of hybridization program. They have the original human template, but more. They have the capacity to activate 24 to 48 strands, which means they can hold that many dimensions of consciousness in a body if they activate. Not all of them will, and not all of them have that much coding. But what all indigo children do have in common is they come in with a very unique, for our time period, DNA strand configuration of 6-strand template activation, which allows them to hold 6 dimensions of consciousness. It takes a while to assemble it, though. Yes?
I have a question just real quick. If an indigo child was to take a DNA test, would you see 6 strands no, it's etheric.
Well, it's not. It's not etheric, exactly. Etheric is a little bit different. It's at a level of particle manifestation that our scientists haven't found yet. This is a level called particai, which are little scalar wave configurations formed of units of consciousness that are conscious energy. We haven't gone down that deep yet. So the templates are there. They're not like etheric matter. They're really there. They're scalar wave form.
We just haven't invented the equipment to identify them.
Exactly. But I believe it's in China. I have heard through someone else's work. Speaker dinner 6 p.m. Room needed next at 7. Okay. Thank you. Okay, what time is it? Oh, okay, so if we don't want to miss dinner. Okay. Okay, anyway, the indigo children is a whole other subject. I have a lot of work on that. In fact, I have a booklet on indigo children at the table over there in the other room if anybody wants that too. There's a whole paradigm of information here. I've like dumped a lot on you just to give you a feel for the most important of what we're in the middle of right now. There are avenues to explore. Some of them we have at the table so you can look at them. What my life is about now is I do this full time. I work round the clock. And literally in the last 2 years, I have worked 17 to 20-hour days with very, very little sleep to prepare the amount of material that they have given me to prepare because it was so important, because people needed to begin working with this material. And it's not easy. I mean, doing things like this, they don't manifest. I wish they did. I say, why don't you just beam one down for me? You know? But it needs to move through me and come out, on the keyboard. So there are a lot of things, more information, from the science part to the spiritual teachings, the Law of One, to something called Melchizedek Ordinations, which is a transmission from somebody who has the strand templates, biofield transmission to receive them, which gives you the template to begin working with the biogenesis technologies. There's a huge amount of data involved with the paradigm we're being taught. The most important thing to understand before we leave is who's teaching it. I'm just a speaker. But this information is coming from the Emerald Order, Melchizedek Cloister. They are the original consciousness gestalts out of which humanity was created. And the races that are the heads of the Guardian Alliance are the Lyran, Syrian, Anahazi, which were the founder races that created the human genetic line, the original human genetic line. There is a lot of diversity in the human gene code at this point. We have something called substrand DNA matrices that our scientists haven't found yet that contain stellar coding from the Pleiades life forms, from the Sirius system life forms, from the Lyran system life forms. But the core template we started with was the Lyran Syrian imprint. That's how we got into density. Came down from density 4, Anahazi, down into density 3. And there was part Anahazi there. Then they created something from the Anahazi called the Azarites, which are the Syrian blues. And then the Syrian blues in density 3 and 2 created another race called the Orifim, or the light bearers. They were the seed host for what became the human lineage. This is our true and first intergalactic heritage to take us all the way back up to our 12th dimensional level and higher, but back to the crystalline liquid light pre-matter that is what's called our Christos template. The people who are teaching us this information are teaching it because they promised in the Emerald Covenant that they would help this race that was once an angelic race that had fallen. They would help this race to reclaim its identity and its heritage and its power and the ability to love again. So that's why they're here. And I'm just a speaker. I am an incarnate member of that collective of consciousness. And many of you might be as well. So I hope that in this kind of strange piecemeal type of presentation I just gave you, usually I use charts, diagrams, all sorts of, very logical things. This time I'm speaking to you from the heart. There's things you can do if you're aware. We're going to be putting up a website soon. We've been teaching so much and traveling all over doing grid work that we haven't had time to put up a decent website, but that's coming. The guardian races need your help. And you start with yourself, with realizing you are an angelic human. You have that heritage and you can bring it back to yourself. I'm going to be giving workshops on that in December 29th, 30th, and 31st. We're giving a New Year's workshop. Part of it is on the mass events that are taking place. That would be Saturday. And then Sunday, it's on your angelic human heritage and reclaiming it. It gets into Kundalini activation, DNA activation, and all that stuff, the science of your spiritual actualization. So these are the things that I'm doing to try to help spread this message. I would love to be able to do all of this stuff for free, but the reason I can't is because I have to have a computer, which means I have to have a house to put it in, which means I have to have somebody to pay the electric bill for me. And right now, I have to work to do that. If I'm producing information at 17 and 20 hours a day, sometimes on a very consistent basis, plus traveling all over the universe, it seems these days, we went to Egypt, Peru, England, to do grid work. It has to be able to sustain me as well. So if you look at the fact that I sell tape sets, yes I do. It gets the information to the people and it gives us fuel. Everything goes into the Azurite Temple. The Azurite Temple of the Melchizedek Cloisters, an organization I was asked to set up on behalf of humanity by the Guardian Alliance. It's a nonprofit organization. We have about 200 legally ordained ministers at this point. And that's where the proceeds for everything go. So I can keep doing this. Because as you probably know, you can tell by numbers of people in rooms that, no, that's probably not a very profitable place to be. No, I'm not here for the money. I'm here because I have a message that I really hope people will help me to carry and help this race to work through. So, 6 p.m. speaker dinner, so I'm going to let you go. I hope you come and join me with the workshop. I'm not sure even what they charge for the one. Is it? I'm here tomorrow also. Yeah, and they didn't tell me what time in on my tomorrow one, so I have to find out. But it's a good. I love this. Yeah. Okay. So I would recommend, if you want to know more about me, you can pick up one of these green sheets out at the table. They're free. And also the purple sheet is the free Mahara Seal technique, and spread it far and wide. Thank you.